Greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the first ACE webinar of 2017, featuring University of Pittsburgh Director of Athletics, Heather Lyke. My name is Paul Perrier from Rutgers Athletics, and I have the distinct pleasure of moderating our discussion with Heather. We're extremely lucky to have one of the top AEDs in the country today. Heather's been in the industry for over 22 years, most recently being named the Director of Athletics at Pittsburgh in March 2017. At her time at Pittsburgh, Heather served as the athletic director at Eastern Michigan University for 4 years. She's also served with Ohio State on the executive team for over 15 years and spent time at Cincinnati and with the NCAA. During her time with the Bearcats, Heather was SWA and Assistant Athletic Director for Compliance. Also before that, Heather was part of the NCAA's prestigious postgraduate internship program, where she interned with the enforcement and student athlete reinstatement departments, which I'm sure we're all somewhat familiar with. Heather is a former student athlete at the University of Michigan and was the first baseman and captain of the Wolverines' Big Ten Championship softball team. While at Michigan, she earned her bachelor's degree in education and then went on to complete her Juris Doctor at the University of Akron Law School. Heather's peers use common themes when they describe her: dynamic, passionate, integrity, energy, and a leader. Heather, thank you so much for being with us today. We look forward to hearing more about your journey to the chair. I'd like to kick things off today by just asking an open question and to discuss why you chose to work in college athletics, specifically compliance at first, and how you progressed to your current position.
Wow, that's a big question. Welcome. Thank you, first of all, for having me. It's an honor, and I'm privileged to have the chance to talk with you all. I'm sorry I'm not live in person, but this is a really very technologically savvy and smart way of hopefully getting some thoughts and messages out to you all. And if I can ever help anybody in the meantime, don't hesitate to reach out and connect. So I'll just say that, you know, how did I choose, or how did I get into compliance? I don't know that anyone really choose it, right? But I feel fortunate to have started my career in college athletics there. I have one little technical difficulty. I can't see, I can see you, Paul. Should I see myself or no? Hang on one sec.
Yeah, I believe your camera should be on as well. Oh.
Okay, we got it. Seth fixed me up. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so to give you a little background, I was a college student athlete, as you mentioned, at Michigan. And, you know, I think that experience really shaped, you know, why I chose to get into the world of college athletics. My experience was just extraordinary. And so I think that our goal, and my goal, has been to provide being a student athlete at Pitt or wherever you're located, to being a student athlete at Pitt, to make it to one of the most remarkable experiences in the student athlete's life. And because that's what I had, you know, and I was fortunate and to work, you know, play for an unbelievable coach, to have the chance to win championships and Big Ten championships and be captains of the team and all that sort of good thing. But the reality is you learn so much about yourself and the opportunity that you were given that I really wanted to give back to the industry that had given me so much. I was an education and English major and thought I wanted to teach inner city school in New York City to elementary age kids, and I love kids. I love the chance to impact young people. But I realized, you know, I had never really advanced my career. I mean, I never really just been a student. And so my whole life I was a student athlete. So the chance to go to law school exposed me to really focusing on my career. And very candidly, when I was I clerked for a firm my first year, and I realized, okay, I don't want to do that. I can't bill time. I like people too much. So anyway, I'm not a billable time kind of person. And so my second year of law school, there was a woman named Peg Bradley-Doppis, and many of you may know her, but she's the AD at Denver. She just announced her retirement. Well, she was a senior associate AD at Michigan when I was a student athlete. In my second year of law school, I remember calling Peg and saying, like, look, I think I want to be you someday. So how do I do that? And she said, you know what, Heather, you need to go to the NCAA. You need to get some college experience. An athletic experience, and the NCAA is a great place to start because it gives you a really good understanding and a global picture of what college athletics is all about. And so I was fortunate to do that, and I started in the enforcement world. You know, with a legal background, obviously we know that there's many people in the compliance world that start with a law background. It's a natural fit. So I did not really know what I was getting into. But I think what I realized really quickly is the importance of all the relationships that you have to build within the athletic department. And so if I'm a compliance person, the strengths of being in the compliance department compared to academics or development or marketing or, ticket office. Ticket office deals with the public and donors, and development deals with donors, but not coaches and student athletes as much. And academics deals with student athletes, but not, the equipment room. And so in the compliance world, I love the fact that you had the opportunity and the responsibility of building a relationship and an understanding of what every single person in your athletic department does and what their challenges are, what the expectations are, how compliance obviously sometimes weaves in their areas, but you really got to get to know them. I mean, if you don't know the equipment person, or you don't know the marketing people, or you don't know the development people and have real relationships with them, they're not going to come and ask you questions. They're not going to figure out how does compliance impact them. And so the skill set that you learn in compliance is invaluable, in my opinion. Of course, I'm biased to all the compliance people out there, but the skill sets that you learn, is to build unbelievable relationships with people, have a great understanding for what they do, and then help them resolve their problems. And so you're a problem solver, you're a critical thinker, you're a strategic thinker, you have great communication skills, verbally and writing, all that sort of thing. And so I fell in love. I mean, I love compliance. I love building a compliance team. And, I was fortunate to work with some of the best out there. And I'm so proud of all of them and honored to be, friends and colleagues with them. And so I just think compliance was a natural fit for me with a legal background. It was a great starting point. And then I had, I would say I could write the book, a couple different books, but one is what it's like to work for the greatest bosses ever. What is to the greatest athletic directors. So I worked for Bob Goyne at Cincinnati, Andy Geiger and Gene Smith, both at Ohio State. And, just extraordinary leaders, all very diametrically opposed leadership styles and very different people, but strong leaders who cared about me and invested in me. So, and gave me opportunities to learn from them, obviously opportunities to grow. And what I would say about each of them is that, or what I would say after kind of working with each of them would be, what you do is really important. You want to be passionate about what you do every day. Where you do it is really important as well. But who you do it for, to me, is at the top of the list when I look at job opportunities and opportunities to grow. Who are you working for and with every day? And are those people helping you develop and grow? And so, I mean, I'm a Wolverine who spent 15 years in Columbus, so it wasn't about where, right? And sure, of course, I came to fall in love with Ohio State too, but I wore the maize and blue, so it's not a very easy place to work. But who I had the chance to work for is invaluable. Andy Geiger was one of the greatest, most visionary leaders in college athletics, and then obviously Gene Smith is equally as and they both invested, they both cared about where I was going to go and how I was going to develop, and I can talk a little bit about why I think that, but that's sort of my path and how I got going in the compliance world. I find it important.
Well, Heather, you actually segued into my next slide. Our AZ mentoring program is built on the importance of and value of mentoring, and you've touched on it a little bit, but can you talk more about the importance of these mentors have had in your career, and perhaps share who some of them were and maybe some of the stories that you had with them that got you to progress through your career?
Sure. I mean, I think a mentor is an invaluable thing for sure. I would also call them like really an advocate, because you need people in your corner that are going to go and advocate and really nominate or stand up for you and you can't have one. And Gene Smith can't be my only advocate in the room, and so you have to have a plethora of them. But I would say that the depth of those relationships is more important than the breadth of them. So I don't need 30 mentors. If I have 2 or 3 really valued, trusted people that I can count on and call for counsel or advice on this job or that job or this opportunity, I think that that's more important. So yeah, Peg is definitely a mentor. She's always been a mentor to me. She's who I wanted to be, and you know, has always been a listening ear and fantastic. Bob Goyne is a fantastic mentor. I mean, you know, we've stayed in touch, and you know, to this day, you know, he's retired and lives in Jacksonville, Florida, but you know, he gives me great advice from an athletic director perspective, because you walk into that chair and you're like, okay, I know how to lead, I know how to build relationships, but I've never dealt with the board, you know, really managed a board of trustees or a board of regents. I've never really managed a relationship with the chancellor and all the senior staff. And those are critical skills that you don't get until you get into the chair. And so I think you have to lean on some really good athletic directors. And obviously, Andy and Jean are my closest mentors in many ways. And when I have major issues, I will contact them, you know, and reach out to them. And I'll just tell you that the reason why people invest in other people, I mean, I think it's one of the greatest things that, you know, it's great to invest in your own career, but when you're able to invest in others, it's really rewarding. But people invest in others when those people are self-starters. You know, I sit around my leadership team, and I'm just looking for people to take initiative. You know, there's a lot of people, and I'm on a soapbox, but this is my, I get the compliance people, and they come in the door, and they're like, okay, I did compliance for 3 years, and I'm ready to be a sport administrator. Like have some level of patience with your career. You do not have to be an AD by 27, and you do not have to be a senior associate by 20, you know, fill in the blank ages and scripted path. It just doesn't, I'm not convinced that that's a really positive way of managing your career. I think what you need to do is work incredibly hard at what you do, become the absolute best compliance person that you can become, build the greatest team of people around you, and develop and help your athletic department grow and be better than they were a year ago. And don't do the exact same thing you did a year ago. And I know we can get cyclical in our world, and particularly in compliance, but challenge yourself to think differently about the same things you've been doing forever. So if you've been educating kids in the fall, like, how do you do it better next year? What do you do differently? How do you evolve? How do you make it, you know, and then share your ideas. So people that take initiative on my staff, I want to invest in them. So I think that that's sort of how, you know, when Andy got there, you know, I had the opportunity, you know, we had camps at Ohio State, for example, and they were just a disaster. We had 36 sports, probably 30 different camps. They were run 30 different ways. They were 30 different businesses. The money, the finances, the risk, whether we were selling pizza at night or gear in the day, or, I mean, it was just all over the place, right? And there were a lot of risk factors. There was compliance risk, there was liability risk, there's all those sorts of things. And Andy said, hey, you know, this is just such a mess. And I said, well, I'll run camps. I'll build a camp program. I had no experience in camps. You know, I went to camp as a kid, but so sometimes you just look for ways to help your department. So we built a camp program, and we managed 10,000 campers. We, you know, $2.5 million in revenue to the athletic department, and, you know, it just, you can take a small project and make it your own, or help, you know, people who come to me with ideas, who say, hey, I saw this is happening at another school, I saw this at a professional team, and this might work here. I mean, those are, you know, idea generators are really important in our industry. And so, you know, I think that that's important. So when I would take initiative to Andy, he would give me more responsibility. And then with Jean, I did the same thing, like, hey, I'm happy to do this. I'll, you know, it's not so much about getting out of compliance. It's about growing your portfolio as you can and making sure you're doing compliance as well as you possibly can. You know, you just don't want to be perceived as, how do I get out of compliance? It's just not a good perception. And I get that you probably, there are lifelong compliance people, but it's an evolution. You know, work really hard, build great relationships with the coaches, because the coaches value you and see you as someone who can help outside of compliance. That's a positive thing. You know, and kind of be a sponge, volunteer if you're hosting NCAA events or conference tournaments, or, you know, try to get exposed. If you can get on a hiring committee for a head coach as a compliance person, that's a really valuable skill set. Hiring great people is probably the most important thing. I mean, yes, raising money and all those sorts of things. Hiring great people and great coaches is absolutely one of the most important things that we do as an athletic director. So if you can get some experiences in that, and those are ways to just tell your athletic director, you know, hey, I'd be happy to be involved on the next search for the head of marketing. I'd be happy to be involved in any search. I'd be happy to do the research on the candidate if you want. You know, I mean, just however you can look for ways to help is valuable. And so that's what I did for, you know, I think, you know, very frankly, Bob and Andy and Jean. And so they've invested back in me because they knew I wanted to grow and make an impact. So
that's great. And so if you look back now, what are some of the things you wish you would have known when you first started your career in athletics? So a lot of people listening, the mentees are in the first few years in compliance in college athletics. So I think that would be a great tidbit to share.
Yeah, no, that's a good thought. So much. All right, like, you know, perspective. When you find a compliance violation, like, you know, just perspective, you know, understanding that there's a couple of really important lessons. One is my boss at Cincinnati, you know, Bob Coyne came in, our previous AD was fired very contentiously, and he left without saying goodbye. And so all of a sudden, and I was there like 2 months on the job when the AD left and got fired. And so that's why the importance of who you work for became very real to me. So this other AD hired me, and then he gets fired 2 months into the job, and all of a sudden in comes Bob Coyne. I'm like, oh my gosh, who you work for matters most. And so Bob came in at a time that people were very critical of the athletic director, the previous one, and like why they did what they did, why, you know, all those kinds of things. And it's easy to, you know, play Sunday morning quarterback, whatever they call that, you know, where you can be critical of the decisions that people make. And Bob Coyne told me, and I remember this, and I try to keep this in mind a lot, is if you want to be critical of the person that you report to, whoever your boss is, then go get that job. Because if you think you can do it better, go get that job. You know, so it's really important not to be critical and to be supportive of who you work for. And that's why who you work for matters a whole lot. So that's one thing that I think a lot of people spend their time like, oh, why did they make that decision? Or why isn't the AD getting back to me? Or why isn't this happening? It's like, you know, you have no idea the spectrum of things that we deal with on a given day. And when I was in compliance, and again, no disrespect, but like I thought it was the whole world, you know? And I realized that it's just sort of like this sliver of things that someone has, you know, an athletic director or someone has to deal with on a given day. So have some perspective about the importance of the issue. And if it's important, obviously you make the AD known about it. But so that's just, you know, if I'm critical of my chancellor, Heather, go be a chancellor if you think you can do it better. Like, you know, just have some perspective that the athletic department is one sliver in what the chancellor has to deal with on a given day, right? You know, it's a $3.5 billion university. Like, we are just one sliver of that. Now, a very public sliver and a very important sliver, but just one sliver. So I think that that's important. The other really important piece of advice, you know, I wish I would have done this much earlier. So I spent 15 years at Ohio State. So I was that person who just really worked hard every day. I you know, very self-motivated, very driven. You know, all my emails are done, all my you know, everything is done at the end of the day. Now, I can't say that now, but just because you get so many. But I will say that, you know, I was this person like nose to the grindstone. I was just going to work really hard and do the best job I could and think I would get noticed. Of course, I was noticed internally, right? But, you know, at some point, there's people out there that work really hard doing their job every day. And then there's people that manage their career every day. And we sort of know the difference. I'm sure you know people in your department or in somewhere that spend their day networking, connecting, managing their career. Where's their next stop? Where am I going to go next? What am I going to do? And they spend a ton of time on that. So there's a balance. But people who only do that and don't work really hard don't have a lot of content to talk about when you get into an interview, right? They haven't really done anything. But there's a balance. I was working way too hard and not managing my career at all. You know, it was happening. It was evolving at Ohio State, and I was very fortunate to stay somewhere for 15 years and, you know, start in compliance, get more responsibilities, move out of compliance, get additional responsibilities, and really just grow every single year. I got lucky in that sense. And but I wasn't really managing it very intentionally. And so I would say you have to have a balance. Do not manage your career and not work hard. You know, there's a very clear balance there. But don't be afraid to reach out to people, and don't be afraid to take people. If you're you know, an entry-level compliance person and there's a senior associate and you want to learn about them and get to know them, like ask them to go have coffee, have lunch, you know, talk to them, get to know them, look for people, and then you can, hey, if there's ever a time I can help you, don't hesitate to call on me, you know. And then if I'm sitting in that office, I'm like, you know, this compliance person, she offers, like, let's grab her and let's see if she'll help on this project. I mean, that's how it happens. And so another thing I will, this is a tip. So I have this piece right here. I'll show it to you. This is my, like, journal, right? I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I had this friend of mine, and she's from one of my law school classmates, and she's a chief of staff for a president. And she said to me, well, when I was trying to figure out what to do, you know, in my career, basically one day Gene Smith came to me and said, hey, Heather, come in my office. And I said, sure. He's like, what are you going to do? I was like, today, because I got a list of things, you know, here's my list, right? You know, here's my list of stuff I got to get done today. He's like, no, not today, with your life. And I was like, ooh. Well, and I started dancing all over the place. Well, I could teach law school. I love what I do. I love Ohio State. I don't want to leave. I could work in a conference office. I could do. He's like, Heather, when you figure it out, let me know, and I'll help you. So it was his message to me to really think about what intentionally did I want to do. I mean, I had been at Ohio State 15 years. I had done basically everything I could do. I had hired 9 head coaches, and just lots of experiences. So his whole point was, if you want to lead a department, you need to let me know, and then let's go try to get an athletic director job if that's really what you want to do. Because I didn't never come into the business saying, I'm dying to be an athletic director. That's just my ultimate dream job. That wasn't me. And so I went to my friend from law school, and I had lunch with her. And she told me about her journal. So this is my journal. And she said, well, when you go into an evaluation every year, what do you do? And I was like, well, I just wait to get the feedback from my boss and see what he says and, and go from there. She's like, you don't prepare anything? And I was like, well, what should I prepare? And so this is just a little piece of advice to everybody. Think about all the things you do throughout the year. At the end of the year, can you possibly remember everything that you've done, right? There's no way. Because in compliance and in college athletics, there's no 2 days alike, which is awesome. But there's so many things that happen in a given day that you can't possibly remember everything that's happening. So what I do every single month since I met with my friend way back when, and I wish I would have done it at the beginning of my career. So every month, so this is like December 2016, right? So every month, I write down 1 or 2 very key things that we did. 1, 2, 3, whatever. It might just be 1. It might be 2, but probably not like 10, right? So every month, take time at the end of the month and say, okay, we're just about to go into January. At the end of December, what did you accomplish for the athletic department or your area? What did you do? What key issues did you manage? Did you, hire a coach, fire a coach, get a great waiver, help a coach with a particular issue? And at the end of the year, think about it, you will have 12 months, you'll have at least 12 things. If you wrote down 2, you'll probably have 24 things. You could have about 30 things that really impact, big, high-level things, not like, I processed all the paperwork on whatever, but like things that you implemented, things that you did, participated in, and you can summarize that and give that to your supervisor or your boss at the end of the year during your evaluation, and then the boss is like, wow, look at the impact that this person had on our organization. Not only that, But when you go to the next, if you go to the next job or the next interview, or if you're going to be an athletic director, those become the stories about how you lead, or how you manage crisis, or how you manage complex situations, or, those are all the stories that make up your career, and they're captured if you take the time to do it. And so I wish I would have done it from, day one, but it's a really good tool because it makes you go back and show the impact that you've had on your organization for your people. Does that make sense?
So, no, that's a great idea.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, if you put down every piece of paperwork you did in compliance, you'd be filling a journal pretty quickly.
Right. High level.
So with that in mind, you're talking about this journal is a great tool when you're looking at that next position to show all the things you've accomplished. So if you're hiring for a compliance professional, someone to run your office, I think that would be the next step for a lot of people in this program. What skills are you looking for? What are you looking for when people come in and talk to you about their past experience and what they can bring?
I would look for someone who's prepared and ready and excited to lead, someone who has strong leadership qualities, knows how to set clear expectations for their staff and then hold them accountable. It's about building someone who has tremendous relationships with coaches and their staff, knows that, you get the sense that when they come in, they can lead this department, they can build a vision, they can evaluate what we've done in compliance, what we need to be doing, how it's worked well, how it hasn't gone. So those are the stories that you'd say, for example, we were monitoring automobiles or cars or whatever you do now, I don't even know. And we didn't have a system to monitor cars of our student athletes. And so I implemented this system because I realized that, this is an area that we were lacking. Someone who can tell stories about how they made an impact in their department. So you're looking for strong leadership skills, people that know how to build really good relationships with their coaches and their staff, know how to treat compliance as an asset and not this thing that, everybody, stays away from. And, I always ask coaches, again, I look for people's demeanor and approach to compliance and what's their philosophy about compliance. What's your philosophy about compliance? I mean, you got to have that. I mean, you got to nail that. And the nailed answer, in my opinion, is, compliance is. I talked a lot about a compliance conscience. So everybody, my goal is to create a compliance conscience within the athletic department. I don't expect everybody to know every single rule and how it plays into it or whatever, but they need to have a conscience. Because we have 200 people or 100 people or 350 people in our athletic department, and as one compliance person or a team of compliance people, we can't be everywhere and see everything. But we need to make sure that people have a conscience that if something should give them pause or something doesn't seem quite right, that they feel comfortable coming to us so we can help resolve the issue. Not to figure out whether or not there's a violation or not, but let us find out what's going on and see how we're able to do whatever the coach wants to do within the rules, And so what's your approach? A coach asks the question. My response is always help me understand, what do you want to accomplish? What do you want to do? And let's see how we can do it within the rules. But that means the coach has to be open up to you. They have to trust you. They have to engage in dialogue with you. And it's not well, what if a recruit would come in the summer and be able to maybe work at camp? Okay, what recruit? Who are we talking about? Where's this recruit from? I mean, I don't answer hypothetical questions. I do not answer them. Who, what, where, when, why? I'm getting back to my client days. Because coach is well, what if no, not what if, because I know that the coach is thinking about a scenario and they're trying to run. So then it's about relationships and trust. So you get hey coach, well, what do you really want to do? Well, what I want to do is I want to host a camp on another campus and blah blah blah, and this recruit happens to be there, and the parents are, and the parent is the mom is the volleyball coach. I mean, you get to know. You have to have a relationship where coaches feel comfortable and safe sharing the information. So anyway, those are just some initial thoughts about that.
So, I mean, I couldn't agree more. Relationship building is so important in what we do, and makes our job easier to get that compliance conscious. So, in your experience, what are your strategies for building relationships and getting that trust from coaches? Because, you know, a lot of times if you take over an office, sometimes you're coming into an atmosphere where they don't trust the office. They've had a bad experience. So what would you suggest we try to do?
My light flashes if I don't move. Makes me stay awake. No, that is a great question. So, you know, this is human relations 101, right? So I am a big proponent of people skills. So if someone says, well, you know, I'll send an email to every single do you know how many emails we get, like, every single day? So I know technology is important. I know jump forward is important, but I'm an old school compliance person. I mean, really old school. So, like, I did the comp admissions for the football games for the 10 years that I did compliance at Ohio State. I mean, I know every single player and who their guest was and what they looked like and what the phone number was and all that stuff. So we didn't have computer systems that did all this stuff back then. So I believe in personal relationships. So if I'm going to try to build a relationship and I'm a brand new compliance person and they say, how are you going to build relationships with coaches or staff? I'm going to go and meet with them. I'm going to find a time that works in their schedule. Coaches are busy. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but I'm going to make time to go and start to get to know them. And this is never about me as a compliance person, right? Like, you need to be all into that coach's world. You need to know what their schedule is, who they just played, who their recruits are, what their team makeup is. Like, the more you know about that team, the more the coach believes that you care about them, right? If you walk in and be like, so anyway, and they just had a huge loss the night before, or a really close loss, or a really great win, and you walk in and say, hey, you know what, the paperwork that you needed to turn in isn't in. And they're like, do you even know what we just had last night? Like, do you know we've upset the number, whatever team in the, you know, I mean, like, have, again, perspective. So get into their world. And so know what challenges they face, know what opponents they have coming up, know where they are as far as records go. And that's how, I mean, I just think that makes, I mean, that's part of the job that's fun, right? Is following the teams and knowing how they're doing. And coaches who know that compliance people are real people and that we understand that's valuable. And so building relationships in person is first and foremost a priority. It's fine to text and email and that sort of thing. Like, hey, I'm going to stop by, but like, if that's the basis of your relationship, I don't see it growing. You know, I just don't. I think that you have to be able to have that human contact. It's just essential, you know, in what we do. And I think if you only obviously go to coaches when there's a problem, that's another thing. You know, I mean, you can stop by when there's something that is not a problem. And this is hard to do in compliance. I tell a lot of my sport administrators this, but you cannot manage people by sitting in your office. So if I sit in my office all day, you have to manage the organization by walking around. You really do. It's amazing who you see, what you notice, what you pick up on, who you can run into. And some of those informal conversations and informal, unexpected bump-ins are really valuable. And so I think if you're going to see the baseball coach and he, you know, works 10 steps from the softball coach, and you don't really need to see the softball coach, but you can just pop your head in, that's unusual now. I mean, everybody sits behind a computer, right? You know, so I think that those are ways that, you know, you can't put a price tag on the human relationship and you knowing about this. They want to know that you care about how they do.
Have you found that there's importance in developing contacts at the conference and national office level as you've worked in the compliance world?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the relationships with your conference contacts are huge. I mean, I guess Jen Heppel, I'm trying to think, is an example. Like, you know, she's the commissioner of the Patriot League now, and she forever was my compliance person at Big Ten. So I called Jen anytime I didn't agree or trying to figure out what to do or how to manage the situation. And then, yeah, I mean, and so they're lifelong friends now, right? And we've been friends for, 20 years or so now. And then same with the NCAA. I mean, those are, again, my poor compliance people hate me. So when there's a waiver or something, I'll say like, okay, well, who's working on the case? And they'll say, well, I submitted it online, or however you submit it now, right? And I'm like, what do you mean you submitted it online? Like, isn't there a person? Well, yeah, there's a caseworker assigned. Like, did you call them? No, I didn't call them. And I'm like, so that's very foreign to me. In our compliance world, like, you would call the person at the NCAA and you'd talk through the case, and then you'd turn in the documentation, and then they'd call you back. And I mean, I knew the people that were working on the cases. Now it's like electronically submitted. They're going to discuss it, and then we'll get an electronic response. And I'm like, I need a person. So that my compliance people just, I'm like, no, find out who at the NCAA is working on this case, and let's just call them. I want to explain the situation so they understand it. Well, Heather, they'll understand it. No. Again, human contact is important. So yeah, I think those relationships, the more you can connect. Obviously Chris Richardson is at the NCAA. Maybe many of you know him. If you don't, he's one of the best of the best. I worked with him for, 9 years at Ohio State. He was my very first assistant, and he is a gem. And so we laugh all the time about and he's a technology guru, but we laugh about, how disconnected I think we are in spite of being so connected, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What is one topic that you recommend that we follow in the upcoming year? What's one thing in the college athletics world that's really important in the next 365?
Well, the tax reform legislation, I mean, that's a very political situation, is something, I think as an athletic director, we're all following, and to understand that issue, that, basically right now, they're reviewing the tax reform legislation that would really change the way in which donors receive tax credit for donations given to an athletic department. So if there's a donation component tied to ticket sales, they have, the proposal is to eliminate the tax write-off on certain types of donations, and which would, significantly impact how funding is provided across all of higher education. There's a number of pieces of the tax reform legislation that impact higher education in a very negative way. So that's a very, it's a political issue. It's a global issue. The other, I mean, that's sort of heavy, but the other thing, obviously, in the world of compliance is the men's basketball situation involving, all the plethora of AAU basketball coaches and college coaches, and the frank corruption that's happening, and that, people have known this has been happening, and it took the FBI all of, like 3 seconds to figure it out, because they have subpoena power and they have wiretapping abilities, and they're doing, coaches are very brazen about what they've done for many, many years because we haven't had that ability. And what's the worst thing that happens? Okay, I get an NCAA violation. Oh, okay. An NCAA major violation. Oh, okay. I'll get hired back in 2 or 3 years or whatever. And now it's like you could face federal prosecution. I mean, it's a whole different game. And so that's obviously something I'm very curious to see where that goes, because and how our enforcement staff can be improved to limit the amount of, just blatant violations like that.
So after this, we're going to have a Q&A session with the group that'll open it up to everyone to because, I mean, I've got tons of notes here. I keep learning, and it's just been wonderful. Before we just sign off, I want to just throw it out there, Heather. Do you have anything else you want to share before the Q&A session?
No, I want to say thanks for having me. I think, work ethic and relationship building is critical. I think taking initiative in life is important. And don't underestimate what you're able to do, and I'll tell you one thing that, there came to a point when when Jean asked me that question, what do you want to do? And I thought to myself, like, well, if I say I want to be an athletic director and I don't do it, am I a failure, right? And so sometimes you have to be able to put yourself out there. And, I can tell you for sure that whatever you aspire to do, if you don't say it out loud and let people know about it and develop a plan to get there, you will never do it. But don't be afraid. Don't put limits on yourself. That things can happen, and I think the importance of who you work with and for can't be underestimated. I don't know how many of you know Christian Spears, but he's in the office next to me, and I hired him. This is now the third time. I hired him 17 years ago at Ohio State, and we've been lifelong friends. And but he's one of the best compliance people and best compliance minds. But he's a bright mind, and started in the world of compliance and evolved. So everybody can do it, but when you're in it, do the best job you possibly can while you're in it. Okay.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Heather. I mean, this has just been a phenomenal experience. I know everyone's going to enjoy learning from you, and then they're really going to enjoy talking to you tomorrow with the Q&A session. So thank you so much, and we look forward to continuing the conversation.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. Great to meet you, Paul.
You as well, Heather.